Hi everyone, welcome back to the Murder Tapes podcast, season 3, episode 10. Wilson and I went to see Twisters and The Crow, and we loved both movies so much. We've also been enjoying our new apartment because we got so many cool things for it. We ended up getting the lights that go behind the TV and go with the movie you're watching. So we've just been watching all types of movies, and we also finished all of the Interview with the Vampire series, and we're so amazed with how well it was done. If you're a fan of the original, you have to watch it. Aside from that, I hope you all are well and got to do something fun and relaxing over the weekend. We just booked our flight to Seattle yesterday, which we're super excited for. It'll be our first time there, and we're looking forward to hiking and walking through the city. And if you're from Seattle, if you've been to Seattle and have any recommendations on what we should do, where we should go, or if you want to hang out with us, feel free to message me. You can message me on Instagram, you can comment on this episode. And yeah, let's get into today's case. I originally read about this case in a news article and couldn't believe what I was reading. Today we're going to be talking about the Leonard Lake and Charles Ng case. Leonard was born in San Francisco, California. At the age of 6, following his parents' separation, he and his siblings moved in with their grandparents. Although he was recognized as a bright child, he developed an inappropriate fascination with pornography, which began with taking nude photographs of his sisters, reportedly encouraged by his grandmother. There were also claims that Leonard coerced his sisters into providing him with sexual favors. It is not officially known how many people Leonard has killed, but it is believed that his very first victim was his own brother, Donald. And we'll get into that a little bit later in the episode. In 1965, at 19 years old, Leonard enlisted in the Marine Corps and completed 2 tours in the Vietnam War as a radar operator. After being diagnosed with schizoid personality disorder, he received a medical discharge in 1971 and underwent psychotherapy for 2 years at Camp Pendleton. Upon returning to civilian life in San Jose, California, he briefly attended San Jose State University, but dropped out after 1 semester. It is thought that he joined a group of hippies in the early 1970s and lived in a commune. Leonard married in 1975. But the marriage ended quickly when his first wife discovered his involvement in making and starring in amateur pornographic films, often featuring themes of bondage and sadomasochism with other women. These scenes included leather straps, shackles, and handcuffs. In 1980, Leonard was sentenced to prison for car theft, finishing his term with only a year of probation because the judge was sympathetic towards him. He remarried in 1981 to Clara Lynn Balaj, whom he had met at a Renaissance fair in 1977. Leonard moved her to a communal ranch in Ukiah, California. The ranch was ideal for debauchery, deceit, and partner swapping. Their neighbors learned that Clara Lynn was fired from her teacher's aide position at Anderson Valley High School in Boonville. It was revealed that she taught children how to make explosives. She informed a General Sessions Court that she thought the information could be useful if the children wanted to blow up tree stumps for land clearing in the fields. The judge found her credible. Their marriage quickly fell apart as Clara Lynn grew weary of Leonard's erratic behavior and his push for her to participate in pornographic films. In 1982, Leonard faced arrest for a firearms violation, but he skipped bail and moved to a ranch in Wilseyville, which belonged to his ex-wife. He then used the name Charlie Gunner. That same year, he befriended a 24-year-old man from Hong Kong named Charles Ng. Born to affluent Chinese parents, he spent his life causing one problem after another. After being expelled from public school in Hong Kong, his wealthy family sent him to a private institution in England, where he was quickly kicked out for stealing from classmates. Frustrated with his behavior, his parents sent him to California to live with an uncle and continue his education. There, he only got into more trouble. Rather than face the embarrassment of a hit-and-run charge, he enlisted in the Marine Corps, claiming Bloomington, Indiana as his birthplace. This marked the beginning of his downward spiral. Charles resisted every attempt by his superiors to mold him into a disciplined Marine. He fancied himself as a ninja warrior, and while stationed at Kaneohe in Hawaii, often boasted about his hand-to-hand combat skills, earning the nickname Bruce Lee among fellow Marines who kept their distance from him. In October 1979, Charles and two accomplices broke into a Marine arsenal, stealing $11,000 worth of weapons, including 3 automatic rifles, 7 revolvers, a night sight scope, and 3 grenade launchers. The response from the Marine Corps and officials in Washington was predictable. He was arrested. During psychiatric evaluations, he nonsensically claimed to have assassinated someone in California, but offered no details. He took pride in having slipped cyanide into salt shakers in the mess hall while in Kaneohe, thankfully without any reported fatalities. He also told the psychiatrist about firing a grenade launcher at a staff sergeant in a failed attempt to kill him, cheekily remarking, quote, "Damn the luck. The grenade was a dud." The psychiatrist viewed most of his tales as a product of a vivid imagination and a penchant for absurd boasting. Convinced he would be found guilty of stealing the weapons, Charles escaped custody. By 1981, he was declared a deserter but managed to connect with Leonard after responding to a personal ad in a survivalist magazine. Neighbors would recall seeing Leonard and Charles wearing shirts that say, quote, "Mercenaries do it for money." They began living together at the Wilseyville Ranch. This home was transformed into a house of horrors. Leonard hoarded illegal weapons and video equipment. Leonard's diary was filled with sexual fantasies involving sex slaves that he planned on keeping in his bunker after a nuclear holocaust. One of the entries said, quote, "God made women for cooking, cleaning house, and sex, and when they are not in use, they should be locked up." Another page said, quote, "If you love something, let it go. If it doesn't come back, hunt it down and kill it." Together they engaged in a horrific spree of abduction, torture, rape, and murder, primarily targeting individuals they knew. On June 2nd, 1985, an Asian man, later identified as Charles Ng, was caught shoplifting in South San Francisco. He walked out of a store with a $75 vise and then placed it in the trunk of a tan 1980 Honda Prelude. By the time police arrived, he had escaped, but his companion, Leonard Lake, was apprehended. A search of his vehicle uncovered a .22 caliber revolver that had been illegally modified with a silencer. Leonard claimed to be Robin Stapley, presenting a driver's license with that name. However, police grew suspicious, noting that the license indicated Stapley was 26, while Leonard appeared to be in his late 30s. The license plate revealed to be registered to a man named Lonnie Bond. However, the plate belonged to a Buick, not the Prelude. Leonard was taken into custody. He denied all charges of impropriety. During questioning at the station, Leonard requested a glass of water, which he used to ingest a cyanide pill hidden in his shirt. Leonard had sewn it in. He collapsed and was rushed to the Kaiser Permanente Hospital, where he fell into a coma and remained on life support for 4 days before being declared dead. By that time, authorities had verified his real identity as Leonard Lake. They also discovered that the genuine Robin Stapley had been missing for several weeks. A review of computer records indicated that 26-year-old Robin Stapley was the founder of the Guardian Angels chapter in San Diego. His family had reported him missing several weeks prior. When family members were called in to identify the body, they insisted it was not Robin. They claimed this individual was an imposter. A fingerprint analysis confirmed that the overweight, bearded body belonged to Leonard Lake. Leonard's vehicle was registered to 39-year-old Paul Cosner, who had disappeared 9 months earlier in November 1984. Investigators conducted a search of Leonard's ranch in Wilseyville, where they found evidence of his survivalist lifestyle, including a bunker and an arsenal of weapons. In his diary, Leonard expressed his belief that a global nuclear war was imminent and outlined a plan to survive in his bunker and repopulate humanity using female captives, a scheme he referred to as Operation Miranda, inspired by a character from John Fowles' novel, The Collector. The police also discovered videos featuring Leonard and Charles torturing and sexually assaulting women. I'm going to include a link in the show notes that shows some parts of these videos for educational purposes. A thorough excavation of the ranch's grounds uncovered 12 bodies buried in shallow graves. Among the victims were two families, Harvey Dubbs, his wife Deborah, and their infant son Sean, as well as Lonnie Bond, Brenda O'Connor, and their baby Lonnie Jr. The women had been sexually assaulted and murdered after their husbands and children were killed. Additionally, 5 of the deceased were men who had been lured to the ranch under false pretenses, including Robin Stapley and Paul Cosner. The 12th victim was identified as 18-year-old Kathleen Allen, who had previously known Charles through her boyfriend, a former prison cellmate. She was a high school student in San Jose, juggling a part-time job at a supermarket when she crossed paths with Leonard and Charles through an ex-con named Mike Carroll. Authorities later uncovered that Mike found twisted enjoyment in witnessing death. He and Charles had shared a cell at Leavenworth. Since Mike's release on parole, they had engaged in numerous questionable activities together. Kathleen quit her job after getting a call informing her that her boyfriend had been shot and was on the verge of dying. The police traced her last paycheck to Leonard's address in Wilseyville. In one of the videotapes, Leonard threatens to murder the frightened naked girl and dispose of her, quote, Mike, if she fails to comply with his demands for a sex orgy. It's like a horror film, Sheriff Ballard remarked to journalists during a press conference. It's incredibly vicious. On June 8th, a large number of police began methodically excavating around Leonard's bunker to preserve potential evidence. Using specially trained canine units, they unearthed approximately 50 pounds of human skeletal remains, fragmented bones, teeth, and partial remains belonging to missing women, men, and children. Alongside these discoveries, they found jewelry, decayed clothing, and several driver's licenses, including those of Robin and Mike. One of the decomposed bodies was confirmed to be Randy Jacobson. Randy was a 34-year-old unemployed drifter that disappeared in October 1984 after responding to a newspaper ad to sell his van. Donald Giletti, a 38-year-old popular disc jockey in San Francisco, answered an ad in a sex tabloid that offered free oral sex from an Asian male. He was later discovered shot 3 times in his home study, and his roommate identified the man who visited Giletti that night as Charles. Terry Parker, who stepped in as a coroner when he wasn't managing the area's only 2 funeral homes, was part of the team searching for bodies. He had a harrowing account that would send chills down anyone's spine. Quote, when we started digging, we didn't have a clue what we were getting into, but more and more evidence kept turning up. A bone here, a shoe there, an entire body in a ditch. It got to the point where you were thinking, am I walking on someone's remains now? There could be more under every rock. How much longer could this go on? Authorities were hesitant to draw connections between the crimes, providing little reassurance to the 500 residents of Wilseyville, California. California Highway Patrol Officer Bill Claudino noted, quote, people started locking their doors and listening for noises and wondering who lives next door. Harvey Dubbs was a San Francisco resident who disappeared on July 25, 1984, along with his wife and son. A collection of videotapes uncovered home movies that depicted bound women, orgies, and young girls, their faces twisted in agony as they were coerced into performing oral sex and enduring torture. One of the explicit tapes featured a terrified 33-year-old named Debbie Dubbs being sexually assaulted in a manner so severe that it was evident she couldn't have survived. The same tape showed both Leonard and Charles sexually abusing Brenda O'Connor. Brenda, her husband Lonnie, and their son lived next door to Leonard, who went by the name Gunner. Brenda was skeptical of him and even claimed to have witnessed him burying a body in the nearby woods. Rather than alerting the authorities, Lonnie decided to invite a friend named Robin Stapley to stay with them for extra safety. Since May of 1985, none of them have been seen. Held captive, Brenda was filmed being tied up to a chair and pleading for her life while her husband, son, and friend Robin watched, scared for their lives. Charles untied Brenda and forced her to strip naked. She was then put in leg irons before being sexually abused by both Leonard and Charles. During the tape, Leonard could be heard saying, quote, "By cooperating with us, that means you will stay here as a prisoner. You will work for us, you will wash for us, you will fuck for us. Or you can say no, in which case we'll tie you to the bed, we'll rape you, and then we'll take you outside and shoot you. Your choice." Police estimated that there were about 21 missing women, including wives, girlfriends, and daughters on these tapes, being attacked. There were also still photos. Experienced homicide detectives who believed they had encountered every horror imaginable winced at the anguished cries of unfortunate victims enduring sexual violence. The desperate cries of children in the background deeply troubled even the most seasoned investigators. Female captives were observed in agony on the floor, subjected to humiliation in front of both male and female prisoners. Disturbing images depicted young girls ranging in age from 12 to their early 20s being coerced into degrading sexual encounters. Charles was eventually located in Chicago after a gun dealer in San Francisco informed the police that he had received a call from Charles requesting the return of an automatic pistol he had left for repairs at the shop. Charles, who went by lots of aliases, was now calling himself Mike Kimoto. The dealer explained that federal law prohibited the shipment of firearms across state lines. In response, Charles threatened to kill him if he informed the authorities about their conversation. After learning that Charles was in the Chicago area, local police launched a vigorous search for the fugitive. The FBI made every effort to assist. American law enforcement notified the Paris-based Interpol of the federal warrant issued for Charles. The alert warned police departments nationwide that Charles was a demolition expert skilled in setting booby traps, and there was no assurance he could be apprehended alive. The state attorney appealed to the public for assistance in identifying 15 bodies found on the ranch premises. Among them was Clifford Parenteau, who was barely 24 years old and recognized by his relatives from the videotapes. It was believed that he had been murdered. He disappeared shortly after winning $400 in a Super Bowl pool, seemingly vanishing into thin air. A bartender at the Rockin' Robin saloon recalled that the last time he saw either Charles or Clifford, they left together to celebrate Clifford's good fortune, a decision Clifford would come to regret. Jeff Gerald, a 25-year-old drummer with the traveling band, also disappeared abruptly after assisting Charles with some moving tasks. Along with Clifford and 10 others, he was mentioned in the indictment against Charles. State Attorney General John Van de Kamp stated that many victims might remain unidentified forever, as some had been dismembered and fed to chickens or buried. Others had experienced severe pain before being cremated, with their ashes mixed into malt. It was a horrific repetition of past atrocities. It was further revealed that Charles's active role in the serial murders was recorded in Leonard's House of Horrors and on videotapes. Quote, "Unless we can locate Charles and get him to talk, the chances are slim that we'll ever know everything that went on out there. It has become a case so overwhelming, so enormous, and so gruesome that our computer system hasn't been able to keep up with it." Randy Jacobson said farewell to his girlfriend in October 1984 and drove into obscurity. Known as a 34-year-old long-haired flower child from the 1960s hippie era, Randy attracted Leonard's interest primarily due to his attractive girlfriend, whom Leonard unsuccessfully attempted to seduce. The blue-eyed woman later informed investigators that Leonard had offered her a job as a caretaker for a marijuana plantation in Humboldt County, California, which she declined. The last time she saw Randy, she recounted to the police, was on the day he left to sell Leonard his 1981 Ford van. When Leonard Lake was arrested on June 2, 1985, police found in his possession a bank card that belonged to one of his victims, Randy. Randy's body, along with several others, was discovered under a chicken coop on Leonard's ranch. A memorial service was held for Randy by his flower child friends at a San Francisco soup kitchen for the homeless. Evidence revealed that Leonard and Charles had lured several victims from the Pink Palace, a rooming house in the slum district of Haight-Ashbury where Randy resided. Among the victims were Cheryl Okoro, a 26-year-old, and Maurice Walk, a 38-year-old known for his braided hair and gold chains. After enduring indescribable things, their bodies were ground into chicken feed. A relative of Cheryl stated that she had warned Cheryl against accepting Leonard's offer to visit his farm, describing her as a partygoer who lived a fast-paced lifestyle, often marrying undocumented citizens for financial gain. Police believe Cheryl fell victim to Leonard soon after entering his farmhouse. Maurice Walk, an excellent guitarist, was also killed by Leonard and Charles. Like Cheryl, parts of Maurice's body were fed to chickens, and his bones were discovered in nearby woods by Leonard's fortified bunker. The search for Charles, who had been spotted in Canada, quickly intensified. Canadian authorities notified the FBI about a man matching his description seen in a bus station restroom in Chatham, Ontario. A witness reported seeing Charles shaving off his sideburns and eyebrows and later identified him in a photo lineup. This sighting was corroborated with a tip from a Chicago man who had driven a hitchhiker resembling Charles to Chatham, Ontario. The informant, shaken by news of the manhunt, vowed to never pick up another hitchhiker. Canadian police narrowly missed capturing Charles in Sudbury, turning their focus to Vancouver, worried he might head to the Pacific coast and potentially flee to Hong Kong. Charles's criminal habits eventually caught up with him on July 6, 1985, when Hudson's Bay department store security guard John Doyle and George Forster caught him attempting to steal a bottle of soda water. Charles brandished a .38 caliber Cobra during the scuffle, accidentally injuring Doyle. Calgary police quickly subdued Charles, and a California driver's license revealed his identity as Charles Chit-Tat Ng. The manhunt for this brutal killer had ended after 34 days. Charles's hideout was in a vast wasteland near Calgary, and it contained little more than a penknife, $10, and the .38 caliber Cobra. His arrest was met with relief by American authorities. He was placed under 24-hour suicide watch at the Calgary Remand Center, and it was known that he and Leonard had made a pact to commit suicide rather than face imprisonment. Top officials from the San Francisco Police Department, Calaveras County Sheriff's Department, and the California State Department of Justice traveled to Calgary to interrogate Charles. Confronted with evidence, he continued to blame everything on his deceased partner, Leonard Lake. Despite his detailed recollection of the murders, his claims were described as nauseating. The extradition process from Canada proved challenging. Under a 1976 treaty, Canada, like Mexico, is not obligated to extradite suspects facing the death penalty. His lawyer fought against extradition, citing the risk of capital punishment in California. Charles was convicted in Canada for aggravated assault, robbery, and illegal firearm use, and sentenced to 4.5 years in prison. The U.S. had to wait as extradition negotiations dragged on for 6 years before the Canadian Supreme Court approved Charles's transfer in September 1991. The legal saga was marred by delays and complications. Due to pretrial publicity, the case was moved to Orange County, which was already financially strained. The trial, referred to as the Lemon Law case of California's judiciary system, began on October 26, 1998 on the 11th floor of the Orange County Courthouse. Deputy Attorney General Charlene Honica and Calaveras County District Attorney Peter Smith prosecuted the case, while Bill Kelly, an assistant Orange County public defender, represented Charles. Judge Robert Fitzgerald presided over the trial. During the proceedings, Charlene presented video evidence detailing Charles's horrific acts. Jurors watched as his vile behavior was captured on tape, including threatening Kathleen Allen and sexually assaulting Brenda O'Connor. In another video, Leonard detailed his plans to enslave young women. Bill argued that Leonard alone was responsible for the murders Charles was accused of, claiming Charles only witnessed the crimes. Quote, "I'm not saying Charles is an angel. He's certainly not that, but he's charged with murder here. Remember, ending people's lives, not cutting off their clothes." The trial was plagued by Charles's stalling tactics. By 1991, he had cycled through 2 defense teams, sued the state over his detainment at Folsom State Penitentiary, and even fought over whether he could practice origami in his holding cell. His numerous legal maneuvers, including challenges to multiple judges and repeated requests to represent himself, delayed the trial by years. His tactics drew criticism, with one reporter suggesting, quote, "After Charles, California's legal system should be placed on trial." Judge John Ryan eventually took over from Fitzgerald in August 1998, and Charles's legal games were finally curtailed. Despite his outbursts and claims of mental illness, the jury found him guilty of murdering all but one of the 12 victims. In the penalty phase, Bill tried to convince the jury of Charles's potential for rehabilitation, depicting him as a dependent personality led astray by Leonard. Charles's parents from Hong Kong testified on his behalf, but their tearful pleas did little to sway the jury. On May 3, 1999, he was sentenced to death, marking the end of a case that became the longest and most expensive murder trial in California's history. The total cost of the case soared to $20 million, with ongoing appeals likely to drive up the expenses even further. As one prosecuting attorney noted, quote, "The justice system in America has gone haywire. 6 women were able to be identified from the tapes and were thankfully found alive, but 15 remain missing to this day. Children and male captives that were abducted were buried or cremated in an incinerator that was near Leonard's bunker." I mentioned at the beginning of the episode that Leonard's family believes his first victim was his own brother, Donald. In July 1983, Donald's mother reported him missing when he did not come back from his visit with Leonard in San Bruno. She informed the authorities that Donald had gone to Humboldt County in search of carpentry work, and she never heard from him again. She recalled that Leonard had once remarked, quote, "The world would be better off without Don." Donald had gone missing in 1983 and was presumed dead, as was Charles Gunner, a friend from Leonard's military days. The remains of both were later discovered at the ranch in September 1992. The murder spree of Leonard and Charles was featured in 2 episodes of the Investigation Discovery Channel titled Deranged and Wicked Attraction. In Investigation Discovery's Most Evil, Leonard was assigned a score of 22 on Dr. Stone's scale of evil, representing the highest ranking on the scale. The thrash metal band Exodus released a song entitled The Ballad of Leonard and Charles on their 2010 album, Exhibit B, The Human Condition, inspired by Leonard and Charles. I've actually mentioned this band before on this podcast, as they have multiple songs about serial killers. In 2001, NBC's Law and Order Special Victims Unit aired an episode called Manhunt, which dramatized the pursuit of the 2 killers. The episode's antagonist, Daryl Kim, was a composite of both Leonard and Charles, embodying the more dominant traits of the duo, and depicted as being apprehended for attempted shoplifting in Canada. This case is so scary because of the way they were with their victims. Watching parts of the tapes were hard for me, because I kept wishing I could help each victim. I cannot imagine how scared the families must have felt and how devastated their family members were when they had to sit through watching these tapes for the trial. As always, all evidence will be linked in the show notes, and feel free to follow our Instagram at Murder Tapes Podcast. And if you're interested, my personal is at Annalisa. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope to see you on the next one.